The Omega who returned from death. For 3 years, Minute J visited a grave that held a lie. For 3 years, Jian lived as a ghost in his own life. The Alpha mourned a death that never happened. The Omega survived an assassination he was never supposed to walk away from. And when the truth finally surfaced, it would destroy them both all over again, but this time, they'd have a choice. Minute J thought he knew grief. He ruled Busan's underworld as the widowed Alpha, executing anyone who dared ignore their mate's calls, visiting Jian's headstone every dawn, living in a purgatory he'd built with his own arrogance. His bond mark burned constantly, a dead bond that should have gone cold but never did. He told himself it was punishment. Phantom pain. The universe's way of making him pay for 7 missed calls and 1 blocked number that had cost him everything. He was wrong. Because across the city, Detective Han Jiwoo was building a case that would bring down everything Minute J had left. Jiwoo was cocky, aggressive, fearless, everything the gentle Omega Jian had never been. He drank his coffee with 3 sugars, touched his neck when nervous, and knew things about Minute J's penthouse he shouldn't. When Jiwoo walked into Minute J's office to interrogate him about Park's criminal network, the bond mark that had burned for 3 years suddenly exploded with life. Not the dull ache of death. The violent scream of mate found. Minute J looked into Jiwoo's cold eyes and felt his world fracture. Impossible. Jian is dead. I buried him. But the bond doesn't lie. And neither do the eyes of the Omega who'd let his Alpha suffer for 3 years, because Minute J's empire was built on the murder of Jian's parents, and some deaths demand more than revenge. They demand resurrection. 3 years and 42 days after he buried his Omega, Minute J's bond mark came back to life. He was in his office on the 43rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Busan's port where container ships moved like toys across dark water. The same view he'd had for a decade. The same desk where he'd once ignored 17 calls. The same chair where he'd made the worst decision of his life. Everything was the same. Minute J made sure of it. Penance required consistency. He was reviewing shipping manifests with the mechanical precision of a man who'd forgotten how to feel anything except guilt when his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Minute J sigh, Detective Han Jiwoo from the Organized Crime Unit is here to see you. Minute J didn't look up from his papers. Send him in. The police had been circling for months, picking at the bones of Park's dissolved network like vultures. Minute J had prepared for this. Lawyers on retainer, alibis airtight, every piece of evidence scrubbed clean. They had nothing. They'd find nothing. The door opened. The bond mark erupted. Not the dull, constant burn Minute J had learned to live with, the phantom ache of a dead bond that physicians said would eventually fade. This was something else entirely. This was fire, white-hot and violent. The sensation of nerve endings that had been dead for 1,138 days suddenly screaming back to life. Minute J's hand flew to his neck, pressing hard against the mark hidden beneath his collar. His vision blurred. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Impossible. Jian was dead. Minute J had held his cold body. Had buried him in the clifftop cemetery. Visited his grave every dawn for 3 years, speaking apologies to marble that couldn't forgive him. Dead bonds didn't reactivate. It was biological fact. Once severed, they stayed severed. Minute J sigh. The voice cut through his shock. Minute J forced his eyes to focus on the man standing in his doorway. Not Jian. This detective was young, late 20s, maybe 30. Sharp features that held no softness, dark hair cut military short where Jian's had always fallen past his ears. He wore a black leather jacket over a dark t-shirt and jeans, carrying himself with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd fought for every inch of respect he'd earned. Jian had moved through the world like he was apologizing for taking up space. This man moved like he owned it. I have questions about Park Taesung's financial network, the detective said, crossing the office without being invited, dropping a file on Minute J's desk. Specifically, the offshore accounts that were liquidated 3 years ago. The voice was different. Harder. Lower register. But something about the cadence, the slight pause before finishing the sentence, the way his head tilted just slightly when asking a question. Minute J's hands clenched beneath his desk. "I'm aware of Park's network," Minute J said carefully, proud that his voice remained steady despite the bond mark screaming against his neck. "I dismantled it myself after he murdered my Omega. That's public record, detective." "Han Ji-woo," the detective corrected, settling into the chair across from Minute J like they were old friends. "And I'm not interested in what's public record. I'm interested in what isn't." He leaned forward, and Minute J caught a scent beneath the suppressants and blockers, something floral and sweet that his alpha instincts recognized even though his mind rejected it. Vanilla. Jian had smelled like vanilla and sea salt. "You look pale, Minute J sighed, Ji-woo observed, those sharp eyes missing nothing. "Should I come back another time?" "No." Minute J straightened, forcing himself to focus. This wasn't Jian. Couldn't be Jian. This was a detective who happened to trigger some kind of grief response, some phantom bond reaction born from 3 years of self-imposed torture. "Ask your questions, Detective Han." But as Ji-woo opened his file and started talking about money trails and suspicious transactions, Minute J barely heard him. Because the bond mark was still burning. And dead bonds didn't burn. They just didn't. "Ji-woo," Jian reminded himself as Minute J's eyes widened with something between recognition and madness. "You're Ji-woo. You've never met this man before. You don't know how he takes his coffee or what he sounds like when he's sleeping or the exact placement of the scar on his left shoulder blade. You're a ghost. Ghosts don't bleed." Except Jian was bleeding. Not literally. He'd learned to control that 3 years ago when he'd watched from across the street as Minute J discovered the body. A corpse purchased from a municipal morgue, altered with surgical precision by a physician who owed Jian's grandmother a blood debt, dressed in Jian's favorite silk pajamas, planted in their bedroom with the meticulous care of someone who understood that details mattered. Jian had watched through binoculars as Minute J fell to his knees. Had listened through the audio feed he'd planted as his alpha howled, that inhuman sound of a bonded mate recognizing death. He'd felt nothing. He'd made himself feel nothing. 3 years of becoming someone else entirely. Detective Han Ji-woo, orphan raised in state care, put himself through police academy on scholarships and spite, specializes in organized crime. No family. No weaknesses. No bond mark hidden under the turtlenecks and scarves he wore religiously, covering the silver crescent moon that marked him as Minute Jian, missing and presumed dead. He'd prepared for this moment with the obsessive detail of someone who knew one mistake meant death. Practiced his expressions in mirrors until Ji-woo's cold indifference felt more natural than Jian's soft smiles. Modulated his voice, stripping away the gentle cadence, adding gravel and authority. Trained himself not to flinch at the scent of whiskey and gunpowder that still made his Omega biology keen with desperate want. What he hadn't prepared for was the bond. It had been dormant for 3 years, a cold, dead thing in his chest that he'd learned to ignore like chronic pain. The physicians who'd saved him from the assassination attempt said bond death was inevitable after clinical death. 4 minutes without oxygen, they'd explained clinically. The bond won't survive that. You'll feel nothing when it finally goes dark. They were catastrophically wrong. The moment Jian crossed the threshold into Minute J's office, the bond detonated. Not gently. Not gradually. It roared back to life like a beast waking from hibernation, 3 years of dormancy exploding into consciousness all at once. Every cell in Jian's body screamed alpha, mate, home, and it took every ounce of training, every moment of practice, every shred of Ji-woo's borrowed strength not to collapse right there on Minute J's expensive carpet. His hand moved instinctively toward his neck, toward the bond mark that was suddenly burning, then stopped. Ji-woo wouldn't do that. Ji-woo doesn't have a bond mark. "I have security footage," Jian said, and he was absurdly proud of how steady Ji-woo's voice remained even as Jian's entire world was crumbling. "Showing Park Tae-sung meeting with someone from your organization 2 days before his death. Care to explain?" Minute J's eyes were doing something Jian recognized from 1,000 mornings waking up beside this man, the micro-expressions of an alpha trying to process conflicting information, instinct warring with logic. He was gripping his desk so hard his knuckles had gone white, and Jian could see the exact moment Minute J's hand pressed against his own neck. "He feels it too. The realization was vinegar on an open wound. I killed Park Tae-sung myself, Minute J said, his voice flat and dead. 3 years ago. That's public record, detective. I served no time because it was ruled self-defense during a home invasion where His voice caught. Broke. The grief so naked on his face that Jian had to look away. Where my Omega was murdered. The word murdered landed like a knife between Jian's ribs, right where the real knife had entered, right where the scar still ached on cold mornings, right where he died for 4 minutes and 37 seconds while his alpha celebrated winning an empire. Don't react. Don't feel. You're Jiwoo. I'm aware of your history, Minute J sigh, Jiwoo said, cold as winter, while Jian bled internally. I'm investigating whether Park had accomplices who are still operational. It wasn't a lie. There were remnants of Park's network, cockroaches that had scattered when Minute J had torn through the organization like an avenging angel. Jian was hunting every single one, building cases, gathering evidence. But his real target was sitting right in front of him, looking at Jian with eyes that held 3 years of grief, and Jian had to remember through the bond screaming and his Omega instincts begging him to go to Alpha, comfort Alpha, Alpha is hurting. He had to remember, this was the man whose father had murdered his parents. This was the empire built on Park blood, on the stolen shipping company, on the accident that had orphaned a 6-year-old boy and erased his family from history. This was Minute J, who'd built his proposal on the bones of Jian's mother and father. Who'd celebrated business deals on their graves. Who'd blocked 17 calls because an Omega's fear was less important than impressing rivals. Even if the bond was trying to drag Jian across this desk and into Minute J's arms, even if every Omega instinct was screaming mate needs you, even if Minute J was looking at him like he was seeing a ghost. Jian was a ghost. And ghosts came back for one reason. Vengeance. I'll be back with more questions, Jiwoo said, standing. Don't leave Busan. As he walked toward the door, he felt Minute J's alpha presence reaching for him, pulling, the bond trying to complete itself. Detective. Jian paused, every muscle locked. Don't turn around. Don't look at him. Don't. Have we met before? For one heartbeat, Jian let himself remember, yes. You met me on Gwangali Beach when I was 23 and you were 29. You met me at a charity gala where I'd spilled wine on your shirt. You met me in 1,000 small moments that built into a love I thought was indestructible. No, Jian said quietly, Jiwoo's voice steady even as Jian's heart shattered. We haven't. He walked out, leaving his alpha behind. Again. Detective Han Jiwoo returned 4 more times over the next 2 weeks, and each visit unraveled Minute J a little further. The bond mark didn't calm. Didn't adjust. Didn't accept that this stranger was just a stranger. Instead, it intensified, burning hotter each time Jiwoo walked through the door, screaming mate 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 until Minute J had to grip his desk to keep from reaching across it and what? Grabbing a police detective? Demanding to know why he smelled like vanilla under those aggressive blockers? Asking why a dead bond was acting like Jian was alive and standing 3 feet away? Minute J started having panic attacks. The first one hit during Jiwoo's 3rd visit. The detective was laying out financial records, and Minute J's vision tunneled, his chest constricted, the bond mark burning so hot he thought his skin might actually catch fire. He'd excused himself, locked himself in his private bathroom, and pressed his forehead against the cold mirror while his alpha instincts howled. He's dead. I buried him. This isn't him. But his body wouldn't listen. Minute J hired a private investigator, the best, most discreet operative in South Korea. I need everything on Detective Han Jiwoo. Everything. The report came back within a week, airtight. Orphanage records from Daegu Children's Home, where Han Jiwoo had been surrendered as an infant. Academy transcripts showing top marks in criminal psychology. Case files demonstrating a 3-year career built on taking down organized crime. All legitimate. All traceable. All perfect. Too perfect. Because Minute J had spent his entire life in the criminal underworld, and he knew what manufactured identities looked like. They were always slightly messy, A gap here, an inconsistency there, the rough edges of real life. Jiwoo's background had no rough edges. It was pristine. Like someone had built it with meticulous care. But even without the perfect background, Minute J was noticing things. Small things. Impossible things. During Jiwoo's fourth visit, Minute J's assistant brought coffee. Jiwoo accepted it absently, then without looking at it 3 sugars from the tray. No cream. 3 sugars, no cream. Exactly how Jian took his coffee. Minute J's hand trembled so badly he had to set down his own cup. He started watching closer. The way Jiwoo's hand drifted to his neck when he was thinking, fingers pressing against the exact spot where Jian's bond mark had been, hidden now under a black turtleneck. The way Jiwoo had referred to the bedroom during one interview before catching himself and correcting to the crime scene, how did he know which room? The police reports only said master suite. The way Jiwoo unconsciously avoided the corner of Minute J's desk, the sharp edge that Jian had walked into 100 times, always complaining Minute J needed to rearrange the furniture. The way he moved, trying to be aggressive and confident but occasionally forgetting, his posture softening into something gentle before he'd catch himself and straighten. And the scent. God, the scent. Jiwoo wore industrial-strength suppressants and blockers, the kind that would hide an Omega's nature completely. But sometimes, when he leaned forward to point at evidence, when his jacket shifted and the air currents changed, Minute J caught the faintest trace of something underneath. Vanilla. Sea salt. Jian. Minute J started testing him. This financial irregularity, he said during their 5th meeting, voice carefully casual, it reminds me of something my Omega once said. He was always worried about the business. Called me 17 times one night because he had a bad feeling. He watched Jiwoo's reaction like a predator. Jiwoo's jaw tightened, barely visible, but there. Seems like he was worried about something very real, Minute J sighed. Paranoid, though, Minute J continued, leaning back. Always anxious. 17 calls over nothing. 7, Jiwoo said, then froze. Minute J's heart stopped. What? Jiwoo's hand moved toward his neck, stopped. I meant, what? I said 17, Minute J said slowly, every sense on high alert. But you said 7. Jiwoo's face was a mask. My mistake. I must have read the file wrong. But Minute J had seen it. The flash of pain that crossed Jiwoo's features. The way his other hand had moved, instinctively, unconsciously, to press against his ribs. His left ribs. Where the knife had entered Jian's body. The room felt like it was spinning. The file, Minute J said carefully, doesn't specify how many calls. It just says multiple missed calls. Jiwoo stood abruptly. I need to go. We'll continue this later. Detective. But he was already gone, moving fast, almost running. Minute J sat in the silence and thought. Jian called 17 times total that night. But only 7 before I blocked him. The voicemail was from the 7th call. No one knows that except someone who'd been there. Someone who'd made those calls. That night, Minute J drove to the cemetery. He did this every dawn, had done it for 3 years, 42 days. But tonight he couldn't wait. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't breathe with the questions choking him. The grave was pristine. He paid gardeners to maintain it obsessively. White marble headstone with Jian's name, dates, the inscription Minute J had chosen, beloved Omega. Cherished husband. Gone too soon. Minute J knelt on the damp grass, pressing his palm against the cold stone. Is it you? He whispered. Are you alive? Is that you in my office, looking at me with those stranger's eyes, testing me the way I'm testing you? The cemetery was silent except for the wind through trees and the distant sound of traffic. Because if you are. Minute J's voice broke. If you're alive, Jian, if you survived and you let me suffer, Let me think you were dead for 3 years, there has to be a reason. You wouldn't do that without a reason. He thought of Jiwoo's cold eyes, the calculated way he asked questions, the evidence he was building. What did I do? Minute J asked the headstone. What did I do that was so unforgivable you'd rather let me think you were dead then? The bond mark flared white hot. Minute J gasped, his hand flying to his neck. The sensation was overwhelming, not painful, but present. Like someone was standing directly behind him. Like if he turned around, he'd see. He turned. The cemetery was empty. But the bond mark was burning like Jian was right there, close enough to touch, alive and warm and... I'm losing my mind, Minute J whispered to the darkness. In the distance, hidden behind a mausoleum 50 meters away, Jian pressed his back against cold stone and bit his fist to keep from making a sound. He'd followed Minute J here. Stupid. Reckless. Jiwoo would never do this. But Jian couldn't help it. The bond was pulling him like a leash, and watching Minute J kneel at his fake grave, listening to him beg for answers, feeling the bond scream the truth between them. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm standing right here. But Jian didn't move. Couldn't move. Because Minute J was kneeling at a grave built on lies, and Jian's parents were buried in a cemetery across town under headstones that said accidental death instead of murdered by the man whose son you're mourning. The bond burned. Minute J mourned. Jian bled. And the truth waited, patient and inevitable, for the moment when it would destroy them both. 3 years ago. 10:52 p.m. Jian wasn't dead. Not quite. The knife had found his lung with surgical precision. Whoever Park had hired knew their anatomy. The blade had slipped between ribs, punctured tissue, collapsed the lung in seconds. Jian had felt the air leave his body and not return, felt his vision tunnel to a pinpoint, felt his fingers lose their grip on the phone that had become his lifeline. He'd lost consciousness with Minute J's name on his lips, blood pooling beneath him in a spreading circle that reflected the city lights beyond their bedroom windows. His last coherent thought, he didn't answer. My Alpha didn't answer. Then, nothing. The neighbor, an elderly beta woman who'd always complained about noise, heard the crashes through the walls. Called 911. Gave the address with shaking hands while explaining she thought someone was being murdered. She was right. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. Found Jian in a spreading pool of his own blood, pulse thready and fading, lips blue, eyes open and unseeing. He flatlined in the ambulance at 11:04 p.m. Clinical death. No heartbeat. No brain activity. The EMTs initiated CPR, shock paddles, the desperate choreography of trying to pull someone back from the edge of eternity. 4 minutes and 37 seconds of nothing. Then, by sheer chance, by cosmic accident, by whatever mercy the universe occasionally granted, an off-duty trauma surgeon was 3 blocks away, heard the call on her scanner, responded. Dr. Kang Sejin had steady hands and 20 years of experience bringing the dead back to life. She brought Jian back at 11:09 p.m. His heart stuttered, caught, beat. But he didn't wake. 3 days later, Jian surfaced from morphine dreams to the beeping of machines and the antiseptic smell of hospital air. His chest felt like someone had parked a car on it. Breathing hurt. Thinking hurt. Living hurt. But he was alive. A physician, different from the surgeon, younger, with kind eyes, stood beside his bed adjusting N4. Welcome back, Jian Sai, she said softly. You're at Hornby Medical Center. You've been unconscious for 3 days. You were stabbed, lost a significant amount of blood, and coded in the ambulance. Dr. Kang saved your life. Jian tried to speak. His throat was raw from intubation. Minute J, he managed to rasp. The physician frowned slightly. Your emergency contact? We tried calling, but the number has been disconnected. Blocked. The word landed with the weight of a second knife. You're incredibly lucky, the physician continued, checking his charts. The bond should have killed you when you flatlined. Bonded omegas rarely survive clinical death. The severance typically causes catastrophic system failure. But yours went dormant. It's unusual, but documented in cases of extreme trauma. A biological failsafe. You'll need months of recovery. Gene closed his eyes. The bond mark on his neck felt cold. Dead. Like the connection had been cut. Good, he thought with morphine-dulled bitterness. Let it die. Let everything die. 5 days post-trauma. Gene spent that first week floating in and out of consciousness, riding waves of pain medication and planning. The moment he could speak clearly, he'd call Minute J. Tell him, I'm alive. I survived. Come get me. I need you. They'd figure it out together. Find Park's killers. Minute J would move heaven and earth to protect him now, would never ignore a call again, would. Your emergency contact is listed as Minute J, the physician said during a routine check, reading his chart. Any relation to Minute Taijin? Gene's drugged mind struggled to process. That was his father. Died 5 years ago. Ah. The physician nodded, making a note. I knew him briefly. Brilliant businessman, though there were rumors about how he acquired the original shipping company. She trailed off, seeming to realize she was gossiping. I shouldn't say. But Gene's blood had gone cold despite the warm blankets. What company? His voice was sharp enough to cut through morphine fog. The physician looked uncomfortable. It was 20-some years ago. Before my time, really. Just rumors. A couple died in a car accident, suspicious circumstances, they said, and their shipping business was absorbed into the Minute Empire shortly after. Park something? I don't recall the exact name. But there was talk it wasn't entirely ethical. Park. The machine started beeping faster as Gene's heart rate spiked. His parents were Park Sung-ho and Park Mi Young. They died when Gene was 6 years old, a car accident on a rainy highway, the police had said. Tragic. Quick. No one to blame but bad weather and worse luck. Gene had been raised by his grandmother, who died when he was 19. She never spoke about his parents' death except once, near the end, when dementia had loosened her tongue. Your parents built something beautiful, Gene. And someone took it. Someone always takes. Gene had thought she meant life. Fate. God. Not murder. That night. Gene waited until the nurses finished rounds. Then, with shaking hands and chest screaming in protest, he maneuvered himself to the laptop the hospital provided for patients. He started searching. Park Sung-ho. Park Mi Young. Shipping Company. Busan. 2001. The first articles were innocuous. Local news about an up-and-coming shipping company founded by a young couple, both in their 30s, building something from nothing. Park Maritime Solutions. Rapid growth. Innovative contracts. The future of Busan's shipping industry, one headline proclaimed. Then, tragic accident claims young entrepreneurs. The article was brief. A car accident. Rainy conditions. Both died instantly. Left behind a 6-year-old son. No mention of what happened to the company. Gene dug deeper. Business records. Incorporation documents. Transfer of assets. 3 months after his parents died, Park Maritime Solutions ceased to exist. Its assets, docks, contracts, shipping routes, were absorbed by Minute Enterprises. Owned by Minute Taijin. Gene's vision blurred. He kept searching, each new piece of information a knife twisting deeper. Police reports he shouldn't have access to but found anyway. 3 years of learning to navigate criminal databases for his investigation into his own anxiety had taught him things. Notes about suspicious circumstances. Break lines that may have been tampered with. An investigation that was quietly closed after 2 weeks. A single memo from a detective, buried in archived files. Pressure from above to rule accidental. Minute family has connections. Case closed. Gene sat in that hospital bed, chest aching from more than stab wounds, and understood. Minute Taijin had murdered his parents. Had staged an accident. had stolen their company, had erased them from history. And Minute J, his alpha, his bonded mate, the man he'd loved with everything in him, had built his empire on that foundation. Had proposed to Jian on Guang'an Dock. The same dock his parents had built. Every container that moved through Busan carrying the Minute name was floating on Park blood. On his blood. Jian thought about the penthouse filled with luxury bought with his parents' stolen legacy. About the bond mark that connected him to the son of his parents' murderer. About Minute J blocking his calls while Jian bled out on floors his parents had paid for with their lives. The irony was a scream building in his chest. I loved him. I loved the man whose father murdered my family. I bonded with him. I was going to have his children. Jian made a decision in that hospital bed, hooked to machines, chest held together with surgical staples and spike. He would disappear. He would become someone else. He would dismantle the empire that murdered his family, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, until nothing remained but justice. Even if it meant destroying the man he loved. Especially if it meant that. When the physician returned an hour later, Jian was calm. I need you to do something for me, he said. And I need you to never tell anyone I was here. The physician started to refuse. Jian said 6 words that changed everything. Minute Taijin murdered my parents. By morning, Park Jian was dead. And Han Jiwoo was born. Present day. 6th visit. Jiwoo felt it halfway through interrogating Minute J about a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. A wave of nausea so violent it nearly knocked him off his chair. It was 3 p.m. He'd eaten lunch 2 hours ago. This wasn't food poisoning. Excuse me, Jian managed, standing abruptly. The room tilted. Minute J's concerned face swam in his vision. I need to. He didn't finish. Just walked, fast, controlled, Jiwoo's confidence barely masking Jian's panic, out of the office, through the lobby, into the parking garage. He made it to his car. Didn't make it home. The gas station bathroom 3 blocks away became the site of Jian's body staging a violent revolt, retching until there was nothing left but bile and the metallic taste of fear. When he finally emerged, shaking and pale, he caught his reflection in the grimy mirror. He looked like a ghost. Appropriate, he thought bitterly. That's what I am. But ghosts didn't get sick. Ghosts didn't feel their bodies betray them. Ghosts didn't. Jian's hand went to his stomach. Pressed. Felt nothing unusual. Stress, he told himself. Just stress. The bond reactivation, seeing Minute J, maintaining the cover. But some Omega instinct, buried deep beneath Jiwoo's armor, whispered, you know what this is. 2 days later. Daegu. 3 cities away from Busan. The Omega Health Center was discreet, the kind of clinic that didn't ask questions, didn't report to insurance companies, didn't share records. Jian had used a fake ID, one of 3 he'd created over the years, and paid cash. The physician was a middle-aged beta woman with efficient hands and kind eyes. The blood work is back, she said, pulling up results on her tablet. And I have some unexpected news. Jian's hands clenched on the arms of the examination chair. What kind of news? You're pregnant, Jiwoo sighed. Approximately 8 weeks. The world stopped. That's not possible, Jian said flatly, his voice Jiwoo's cold precision even as Jian's mind shattered. I haven't been with anyone in over 3 years. The physician frowned, checking the results again. The tests are quite clear. HCG levels are elevated, consistent with early pregnancy. However, she paused, scrolling through data. The hormone levels are unusual. Elevated beyond normal first trimester range, as if the pregnancy is catching up? That's odd phrasing, but I'm not sure how else to describe it. She looked up, professional curiosity in her eyes. Have you recently reconnected with a previous mate? Someone you were bonded to? Jian's heart stopped. Started. Stopped again. Why does that matter? Because there are documented cases, rare, but documented, of Omega bodies preserving early-stage pregnancies during extreme trauma. The physician pulled up medical journals on her screen. A biological failsafe. If an omega believes they might die, especially a bonded omega, the pregnancy can enter a dormant state. A kind of suspended animation. When safety is re-established, particularly if the bonded alpha's proximity is restored. It continues, Gian finished, his voice hollow. Horror and wonder mixed in equal measure, drowning him. He was pregnant that night. 3 years ago, when the knife had found his lung, when he'd bled out on that bedroom floor, when he'd called Minute J 17 times with increasing desperation, he'd been pregnant. Didn't know. Had no idea. His body had known, though. His omega biology, faced with death, had made a choice. Protect the child. Save what can be saved. Wait. For 3 years, their baby had been waiting. Dormant. Preserved. A possibility frozen in time. And when Gian had walked into Minute J's office 4 weeks ago, when the bond had roared back to life, when Alpha and Omega had recognized each other across the chasm of lies and graves, their child had started growing again. I need. Gian stood, swaying. I need to go. You should consider your options carefully, the physician said gently. Given the unusual circumstances, I can refer you to specialists. No. Gian's hand went to his stomach, protective and instinctive. No specialists. No records. This conversation never happened. He left before she could respond, before the questions in her eyes could become words, before reality could catch up with him. Guangali Beach. Sunset. Gian drove to the ocean because he didn't know where else to go. Couldn't go home to his apartment where every surface was covered in evidence against Minute J. Couldn't go to the precinct where Jiwoo's mask would crack. Couldn't go to the penthouse that still smelled like vanilla and lies. He parked at the beach where Minute J had proposed 4 years ago, back when Gian was 27 and stupid and in love with a man whose empire was built on his parents' blood. The Gwangan Bridge stretched across the water, lit up in rainbow colors for some festival or another. Beautiful. Indifferent to his agony. Gian walked to the water's edge and screamed. Not words. Just sound. 3 years of rage and grief and love and hate, and now this impossible gift wrapped in trauma, this child who shouldn't exist but does. I can't do this, he shouted at the waves. I can't raise his child while destroying him. I can't. But his hand was already on his stomach, protective, gentle. Their child. Minute J's and his. Conceived before the tragedy. Before the calls. Before everything shattered. The only innocent thing in this entire nightmare. Gian thought about the evidence in his apartment. The case he'd been building for 3 years. The choice he'd been planning to give Minute J, dismantle your empire or watch me destroy you in court. How did a child fit into that equation? I was going to make him choose between his empire and his freedom, Gian thought, pressing his hand harder against his stomach where cells were dividing, where life was insisting on happening despite everything. How do I make that choice while carrying his child? The bond mark burned. Even dormant for 3 years, even scarred and faded, it knew. It knew what this meant. Alpha's child. Omega's child. The biological imperative that superseded everything, even justice, even vengeance, even the blood of murdered parents crying out from graves. What do I do? Gian whispered to the ocean. The waves crashed, indifferent. But the child growing inside him, their child, Minute J's child, the child who'd waited 3 years in biological suspension to be born, that child was anything but indifferent. That child was inevitable. Gian stood there until the sun set completely, until the bridge lights were the only illumination, until he'd cried every tear his body had left. Then he drove back to Busan. Back to Minute J's office. With new evidence in his bag and a secret in his body that changed absolutely everything. 11 p.m. Minute J's office. Minute J looked up when Jiwoo walked in without knocking, surprise and something else, something hungry and desperate, flashing across his face. Detective. It's late. I have new information, Gian said, his voice steady even as everything inside him screamed. About your father's original acquisition of the shipping company. The one he built his empire on. He watched Minute J's face carefully as he placed the folder on the desk. 23 years ago, Park Maritime Solutions was the fastest growing shipping company in Busan. Owned by Park Sung-ho and Park Mi-young. Minute J's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Guilt? They died in a car accident, Ji-in continued, each word a knife he was turning in his own chest. Very convenient timing. 3 months later, your father owned everything they'd built. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. Ji-in's hand instinctively moved toward his stomach, stopped. I'm telling you. Your empire is built on murder, Minute J sighed. And I'm going to prove it. Minute J stood slowly, his alpha presence filling the room. Why are you really here, detective? Because this, he gestured at the folder, feels personal. Because I'm carrying your child, Ji-in thought. Because I died 3 years ago and came back to destroy you. Because I love you and hate you and I don't know which one is stronger. Justice, Ji-in said instead. I'm here for justice. For people who died 23 years ago? For people who deserve to be remembered. Their eyes met across the desk. The bond screamed between them, recognizing what both refused to say. I'll see you in 3 days, Ji-in said. With more evidence. Don't leave Busan. He turned to leave. Detective, Minute J called out. Ji-in paused, not looking back. Whatever you think you know about my father, about me, there's more to the story. There always is, Ji-in said quietly. Then he walked out, one hand protectively on his stomach where their child grew, the other clutching evidence that would destroy the child's father. And the bond burned with the weight of truths neither of them was ready to speak. The storm rolled in from the East Sea like divine judgment. Ji-in felt it in his bones as he drove to Minute J's building at 11 p.m., the flash drive burning in his pocket like a live coal. Evidence. Proof. 23 years of lies condensed into digital files that would either save them or damn them both. Thunder cracked overhead as he pulled into the underground parking garage, rain already beginning to hammer against the concrete structure. The garage was nearly empty at this hour, just a few luxury cars gleaming under fluorescent lights that flickered with each lightning strike. Ji-in killed the engine. Sat in the darkness. Hand on his stomach where their child grew, other hand on the flash drive. This is it. Give him the choice. Let him decide who he wants to be. He stepped out of the car. Minute J was waiting. The Alpha emerged from behind a concrete pillar like a shadow-gaining substance, and Ji-in's heart stopped. Minute J looked feral, hair disheveled, shirt partially unbuttoned, eyes wild with something between desperation and certainty. I knew you'd come, Minute J said, his voice rough. I've been waiting here for 3 hours. Tracking your car. Hoping you'd. He stopped, swallowed hard. Who are you? The question was barely above a whisper. Really? Because my bond mark has been screaming for 2 weeks that my dead mate is alive, and you're standing here smelling like vanilla under those suppressants, and I'm either insane or you're. I'm no one, Ji-in said, but his voice cracked on the lie. Liar. Minute J moved fast, faster than Ji-in expected, backing him against a concrete pillar, caging him in with arms on either side. Not touching. Not yet. But close enough that Ji-in could smell him, whiskey and gunpowder and desperation. Close enough that the bond detonated. Your scent, Minute J breathed, and there was something breaking in his voice. Your tells. The way you knew which bedroom without being told. The way you flinched when I mentioned the calls. The way you said 7 when I said 17. Who are you? Thunder cracked directly overhead. Rain began leaking through the garage entrance, turning the concrete dark. Ji-in stared at the Alpha who'd been his everything, whose child was growing inside him, whose father had murdered his parents, and felt 3 years of armor shatter. I'm the Omega whose parents you murdered, he said, and watched Minute J's face drain of color. I'm the ghost you think you buried. I'm the mate who let you suffer for 3 years because you deserved it. No. Minute J stumbled backward as if shot. No, you're dead. I held your body. I buried you. I visit your grave every. You visit an empty grave, Jian interrupted, each word a blade. A purchased corpse. A lie I needed you to believe. Prove it. So Jian yanked down his turtleneck, exposing the bond mark. The silver crescent moon, scarred and faded from 3 years of dormancy, but unmistakably there. Unmistakably his. Minute J's knees gave out. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, kneeling on the wet concrete, staring up at Jian with eyes that held every nightmare and prayer combined. Jian, he breathed, and the name was a prayer, a curse, a death sentence. The bond snapped fully into place. Not gently. Not gradually. 3 years of forced separation ending in a cataclysm of sensation. Alpha and Omega, mate recognizing mate, biology overriding logic and pain and history. The bond roared through both their bodies with such force that Jian cried out, his knees buckling, his hand flying to the mark that was suddenly alive again. Minute J reached for him. Instinct, need, Alpha must catch falling Omega. Jian slapped his hand away with enough force to crack. Don't, he hissed, pressing back against the pillar to stay upright. Don't you dare touch me. You don't get to mourn me and then act like everything's fine now that I'm alive. Your father murdered my parents. You built your empire on their blood. You proposed to me on the dock they built. His voice broke. Rain was pouring through the entrance now, soaking them both, turning Minute J's white shirt transparent and plastering Jian's hair to his face. And Jian's breath hitched. I loved you so much I let myself forget. I ignored every warning sign. My grandmother told me someone took what my parents built, and I convinced myself she meant fate. I convinced myself the Parks who died were different Parks. I was so desperate to believe in our happiness that I betrayed my own family's memory. Thunder shook the foundation. Lightning illuminated Minute J's devastated face in stark flashes. How long have you known? Minute J asked, his voice destroyed. Since the hospital. 3 years ago. I woke up after dying for 4 minutes, and a physician mentioned your father's name in the same breath as my parents' company. I started digging. Found everything. Jian laughed, the sound jagged. And I decided you'd never know I survived. The body. Purchased from a morgue. Altered with surgical precision. I'm good at research, Minute J. I learned from the best criminals, didn't I? The barb landed. Minute J flinched like Jian had struck him. Why now? Minute J asked hoarsely. Why reveal yourself? Jian pulled the flash drive from his pocket, held it up. Water streamed over it, over his hand, over everything. Because I have everything. Every crime. Every murder. Every dollar stolen. Every life your father destroyed to build his empire. And I'm giving you a choice. He took a step forward. The bond screamed at the proximity, begging them to close the distance, to touch, to complete. You can let me destroy you, Jian said. I testify in court. The evidence goes public. You go to prison. The empire falls. Everyone knows what the Minute family really is. Or you do it yourself. Jian's voice dropped. You dismantle everything your father built. You turn over evidence to authorities. You cooperate. You serve your time. You earn your redemption instead of having it ripped from you. Lightning flashed. Thunder answered. And maybe, when you're free, our child will have a father who chose justice over power. The silence was absolute. Then, child? Minute J whispered. Jian's hand went to his stomach, protective, instinctive, the gesture he'd been hiding for days. I was pregnant that night. 8 weeks. Didn't know. His voice was steady now, clinical. My body preserved it when I died. Biological failsafe. When the bond reactivated 2 weeks ago, the pregnancy resumed. He met Minute J's eyes. Congratulations, Alpha. You're going to be a father. In about 7 months. Our child has been waiting 3 years to be born. Minute J looked at Jian, alive, furious, soaked in rain, carrying their child, holding evidence of every sin Minute J had inherited, and something fundamental broke in him. He fell forward, pressing his forehead to the wet concrete at Jian's feet. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words were torn from somewhere deep. "For the calls. For blocking you. For my father's sins. For building my life on your parents' graves. For everything. If you want to destroy me, destroy me. I deserve it. I deserve worse than prison. But please." His voice cracked completely. "Please let me be there for our child. Even if you never forgive me. Even if I'm behind bars. Even if you hate me until the day I die. Please don't take that from me too." Jian stared at his alpha, broken, begging, choosing their unborn child over everything he'd built, and felt something crack in his own carefully constructed armor. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the beginning of something. "Get up," he said quietly. Minute J didn't move. "Get up," Jian repeated, and there was steel in his voice. "You don't kneel to me. You kneel to justice. To the memories of people you never knew but whose blood you've been living off." Minute J rose slowly, unsteadily, looking at Jian like he was seeing him for the first time. "You have 48 hours, Jian said, pressing the flash drive into Minute J's hand. "Look at the evidence. Understand what your father did. What you've been perpetuating. Then choose." He turned to leave. "Jian. Don't." Jian didn't look back. "Don't say my name like it means something. You lost that right when you blocked me. You'll earn it back, or you won't. That's up to you." He walked away through the rain, one hand on his stomach, leaving Minute J standing in the flooded garage holding evidence of sins he'd inherited and a choice that would determine everything. The bond burned between them, alive, active, demanding. But for the first time in 3 years, Jian wasn't the only one bleeding. Minute J spent 2 days in hell. Not the metaphorical kind, he'd lived there for 3 years already. This was different. This was the hell of watching everything you believed about yourself dissolve like salt in water. His father's private office hadn't been touched since Minute Taijin's death 5 years ago. Minute J had kept it as a shrine, mahogany desk, leather chairs, walls lined with books his father had pretended to read. He'd never searched it. Never questioned the legacy he'd inherited. "Trust," his father had said on his deathbed. "Trust that everything I built was for you." Minute J had trusted. Now, with Jian's flash drive glowing on the desk and his father's private files spread before him like autopsy reports, Minute J understood. Trust was just another word for willful blindness. The Park's assassination was documented in coded ledgers, project clearance with dates that matched the accident. Payments to a mechanic who'd tampered with brake lines. Payments to a police captain who'd closed the investigation. Payments to a judge who'd expedited the transfer of assets. His father hadn't just stolen a company. He'd purchased a murder. And Minute J, righteous, grief-stricken Minute J who'd spent 3 years punishing himself for 7 missed calls, had been living off that blood money his entire adult life. The penthouse where Jian had died? Bought with Park money. The shipping containers that had made Minute J rich? Floating on Park routes. The very dock where Minute J had proposed, where he'd promised Jian forever? Built by Park Sung-ho's hands. Minute J vomited in his father's antique wastebasket. Then he made calls. His remaining inner circle gathered at dawn in the empty warehouse where Minute J had once killed Hyun Woo. 7 men who'd stayed loyal through the purges, through Minute J's grief madness, through everything. "I'm cooperating with authorities," Minute J said without preamble. "Turning over evidence of every crime my father committed, every crime I've committed. Anyone who wants to leave, leave now. Anyone who stays will face prosecution." Silence. Then chairs scraped. 5 men stood, looked at Minute J with something between pity and betrayal, and walked out. 2 remained. Dae-jung, his lieutenant since childhood, who'd stood beside him through gang wars and heartbreak, leaned back in his chair. "Why? Why what? Why throw it all away? You won the war. You control Busan. Park is dead. Hyun-woo is dead. You got your revenge. Why cooperate with cops now? Minute Jae's hand went to his stomach, not his own, but the phantom sensation of Jian's, the barely there curve where their child grew. Because I have a son I haven't met yet, he said quietly. And I'd rather he knows his father chose justice than inherited blood money. Dae-jung studied him for a long moment. A son? Jian is alive. And pregnant. With my child. Fuck. Dae-jung scrubbed his face. That changes things. Everything, Minute Jae agreed. It changes everything. Then I'm staying, Dae-jung said. I'll testify. Take whatever sentence comes. But I'm staying. The other man, Young Sik, a driver who'd been with the family for 20 years, nodded. Me too. Your father gave me a job when no one else would. I owe him. But I owe you more. And if you're doing this for your kid. He shrugged. That's a good reason. Minute Jae felt something crack in his chest. Not breaking. Opening. Thank you, he said. Hornby Beach. Dawn. Minute Jae arrived first, watching the sun paint the ocean in shades of pink and gold. This beach, this exact spot, was where he'd proposed 3 years ago. Where Jian had said yes with tears streaming down his face, where Minute Jae had promised forever. He'd failed that promise spectacularly. Maybe he could earn it back. Jian arrived as the sun broke the horizon, wearing Jiwoo's leather jacket but moving with Jian's careful grace. Minute Jae could see both versions now, the hard detective and the soft Omega, fighting for dominance in the same body. I'll do it, Minute Jae said before Jian could speak. I'll turn over everything. Testify against everyone, including myself. Serve whatever time they give me. No deals. No lawyers softening the blow. Jian's expression was unreadable. Why? Because you're right. Because our child deserves better. Because, Minute Jae swallowed hard. Because I've been living a lie my entire life, and I'm tired of it. Fine, Jian said coldly. Then we're done here. Wait. Minute Jae pulled documents from his jacket. I have conditions. You don't get to make. Not for me. For you. Minute Jae held out the papers. The penthouse is in your name now. So are the legitimate businesses, the cafes, the real estate holdings, everything not connected to criminal activity. Offshore accounts totaling 800 million won. Clean money. Verified clean. For our child. For you. Jian stared at the documents like they might bite. I don't want your money. It's not mine. Minute Jae's voice was steady. It's yours. It's our child's. I won't be there to provide. This is the only way I can. He stopped. Started again. Please. Let me do this one thing right. The ocean crashed behind them. Seagulls cried overhead. The world kept turning, indifferent to their tragedy. Can I? Minute Jae's hand hovered over Jian's stomach, trembling. Can I touch? Just once? Jian's jaw worked. Then, barely, yes. Minute Jae's palms settled on the bare leather curve, and the world stopped. The bond flooded with sensation so overwhelming it drove both of them to their knees. Alpha touching mate touching child, the holy trinity of Omegaverse biology. Minute Jae felt everything, Jian's heartbeat, the flutter of their child's tiny existence, the bond singing with completion and agony in equal measure. Hi, little one, Minute Jae whispered against Jian's stomach. I'm your Alpha Appa. And I'm so sorry I won't be there when you're born. But I promise, I'm doing this so you can be proud of me someday. Jian made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Minute Jae pulled back, giving space, even though every instinct screamed to hold on. I'm going to prison, he said. Probably 7 to 10 years. Our child will grow up without me. But I need you to promise me something. What? Jian's voice was wrecked. Tell them the truth. Tell them their Alpha Appa chose to do the right thing. That he loved their Omega Appa more than power. That he, Minute J's voice shattered. That he's sorry he can't be there for first steps and first words and everything else. But he's doing this so they can look at him someday without shame. Tears Jian hadn't cried in 3 years finally fell. I hate you, he whispered. I hate that I still love you. I hate that this baby is going to have your eyes. I hate that you're doing the right thing now when it's too fucking late. I know. And I hate, Jian's breath hitched. I hate that I'm going to wait for you. Even though I shouldn't. Even though it's stupid. Even though you don't deserve it. Minute J's head snapped up. Jian. 7 years. Maybe 10. Jian stepped back, putting ocean between them. Our child will ask about you, and I'll tell them the truth. All of it. The good and the terrible. And when you're released. He met Minute J's eyes across the distance. We start over. Not where we left off. We start from the beginning. You earn my trust. You earn our child's love. You prove you've actually changed. I will, Minute J said, and it was a vow more sacred than their wedding. Every single day. I promise. Don't promise, Jian said. Just do it. Then he walked away across the sand, one hand on his stomach, leaving footprints the tide would erase. Minute J watched until Jian disappeared. Then he pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. I need you to arrange a meeting with the prosecutor's office, he said. I'm turning myself in. And I have evidence they'll want to see. He had an empire to dismantle and a life to pay for. But for the first time in 3 years, Minute J felt something other than grief. He felt purpose. Park's remaining loyalists weren't going to let justice happen quietly. They discovered Jian was alive through a mole, a detective Park had planted in the organized crime unit years ago, someone who'd been feeding information, watching, waiting. When Jian submitted himself as a protected witness 3 months into his pregnancy, when his name appeared on court documents as Park Jian, presumed deceased, key witness in Minute Taijin murder conspiracy, the cockroaches scattered. But one stayed to bite. 3 days before Minute J's scheduled surrender, they made their move. Jian was at a safe house in Horndy, a nondescript apartment with reinforced doors and around-the-clock police protection. 6 months pregnant now, visibly showing, moving with the careful grace of someone carrying precious cargo. The bond hummed constantly between him and Minute J, a tether they'd learned to live with even while keeping physical distance. The attack came at 2 a.m. Jian woke to gunfire. Not distant. Close. In the living room. In the hallway. Getting closer. The bond mark erupted, not with his own fear, but with Minute J's. Alpha sensing mate in danger from across the city, the biological alarm system that superseded sleep and distance and logic. Jian rolled out of bed, grabbed the service pistol the police had given him for emergencies, and barricaded himself in the bedroom. His hands shook. His heart hammered. The baby kicked frantically against his ribs, sensing distress. Please, Jian thought desperately into the bond. Please, Alpha, I need you. Across bosom, Minute J woke screaming. Not from a nightmare. From the bond igniting like someone had poured gasoline on it and struck a match. Mate in danger. Omega needs you. Protect, protect, protect. He didn't think. Didn't grab weapons or call for backup or consider that he was under house arrest awaiting trial. Just moved. His Maserati hit 180 kilometers per hour on empty highways, ran every red light, the bond pulling him like a leash toward Jian with such force that Minute J's vision tunneled to a single point. Get there. Save mate. Protect child. He arrived at the safe house to chaos. The door blown open. 2 police officers dead in the entrance. Another 3 down in the hallway, blood pooling on generic beige carpet. And 5 armed men, professionals, mercenaries, the kind Park would have kept on retainer for exactly this situation, advancing on the bedroom door. Minute J didn't have weapons. Didn't need them. An alpha protecting his pregnant mate was one of nature's most dangerous forces, biology and desperation combining into something primal and unstoppable. What followed was brutal. Minute J hit the first man like a freight train, snapping his neck before he could turn. Used the second man's own gun against him, 3 shots sent to mass. The third man got a blade into Minute J's shoulder, he felt it, registered it, didn't care, before Minute J's hands found his throat and squeezed. The fourth and fifth men started shooting. Minute J took a bullet in his side. Another in his thigh. Felt them like distant bee stings, his alpha biology flooded with so much adrenaline and protective rage that pain was just information his body would process later. He killed them both with their own weapons, moving through the apartment like death given form, until 5 bodies littered the floor and silence fell. Then Minute J crashed through the bedroom door. Jian was pressed against the far wall, gun raised in shaking hands, eyes wide and terrified. 6 months pregnant, wearing one of Minute J's old shirts, looking so small and fragile and alive that Minute J's knees nearly gave out. Alpha, Jian breathed, and the gun clattered to the floor. Minute J caught him as Jian's legs gave out, pulling him close, running hands over him checking for injuries, breathing in vanilla and fear scent and feeling the bond sing with mate safe protected. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? The baby. Something's wrong, Jian gasped, and Minute J felt wetness. Looked down. Blood. Not from gunshot wounds. From between Jian's legs. No, Minute J whispered. No, no, no. The baby, Jian's face was white with pain. Alpha, something's wrong with the baby. Minute J didn't remember getting to his car. Didn't remember the drive to Busan Medical Center, only Jian's hand crushing his, only the blood soaking through fabric, only praying to gods he didn't believe in, please. Please. Not again. Don't take them from me again. Police were waiting at the hospital. Minute J had violated house arrest, left a crime scene covered in bodies, was technically a fugitive. Minute J, the lead officer said. You need to come with us. Minute J was carrying Jian through the emergency entrance, his own blood dripping on white tile, his mate barely conscious in his arms. I'm not going anywhere, he growled, and his alpha presence was so overwhelming that 3 officers physically stepped back, until I know my mate and child are alive. Jian went into emergency labor at 2:47 a.m. 28 weeks. 3 months early. The baby was tiny, struggling, not ready for a world that was demanding entrance anyway. Minute J stood outside the operating room. They wouldn't let him in, wouldn't let a bleeding fugitive near the sterile field, pressing his hand against the glass window, watching physicians work, feeling the bond fluctuate wildly with Jian's pain. At 4:23 a.m., he heard it. A cry. Thin, reedy, but there. Their son. Alive. The physician came out 20 minutes later. You can see them. 5 minutes. Minute J entered the recovery room and stopped. Jian was propped against pillows, exhausted and pale, holding a bundle so small it looked impossibly fragile. The baby, their son, was barely bigger than Jian's forearm, hooked to monitors, wrapped in blankets, but breathing. Minute J, Jian whispered. Minute J approached like the floor might shatter, kneeling beside the bed. His perfect, he breathed, touching one tiny hand. Fingers smaller than his pinky, but with nails and knuckles and life. His hours, Jian corrected, looking up at Minute J with something that wasn't quite forgiveness but was close. G-Minute. I named him G-Minute. For both of us. Minute J felt tears, first one since that night 3 years ago, tracked down his face. Hi, G-Minute, he whispered to his son. I'm your Alpha Appa. And I'm so sorry I have to leave. Jian's hand found his. Squeezed. I have to go, Minute J said, not looking away from their child. The police are waiting. I violated house arrest. They'll. I know, Jian said quietly. Take care of him. Both of you. I'll be back. However long it takes, I'll be back. Minute J kissed Jian's forehead, first touch of lips in 3 years, then kissed G-Minute's tiny head, breathing in new baby scent mixed with medical antiseptic. I love you, he told them both. I'll love you until I stop breathing. Then he stood, walked out of the room, and extended his wrists to the waiting officers. "I'm ready." They cuffed him. Read him his rights. Led him away. But Minute J looked back once, saw Jian holding their son, both alive, both safe, and thought, "Worth it. Everything. Worth it." Busan Correctional Facility. Year 1. Minute J served his sentence in a cell that measured 3 meters by 4, with a window that showed exactly 13 degrees of ocean if he pressed his face to the bars at the correct angle. He testified against 4 to 7 people. Spent 6 months in courtrooms, detailing 3 decades of criminal networks his father had built and he'd maintained. Names. Dates. Offshore accounts. Murder contracts. Every sin laid bare under fluorescent lights while journalists filled notebooks and Jian watched from the gallery, stone-faced, holding their 6-month-old son. The Minute Empire was dismantled piece by piece. Assets liquidated. Money redistributed to victims' families, including a substantial donation to Omega welfare organizations in Park Sung-ho and Park Mi-young's names. Everything his father built, erased. Everything Minute J had inherited, returned. At night, in his cell, Minute J wrote letters. Dear Jian and G Minute. Today I testified about the warehouse killings. They showed photographs. I didn't look away. I owed the dead that much. G Minute, your Omega Appa held you during the testimony. You were wearing a blue outfit. You have his eyes. I hope you have his heart too. He wrote every week. 52 letters the first year. Jian replied once a month. Brief updates. G Minute rolled over today. He's healthy. We're fine. Nothing personal. Nothing about forgiveness. Minute J didn't expect it. Year 2. First visit. Jian brought G Minute for the first time when their son was 6 months old. Minute J pressed his hand to the glass partition. They wouldn't allow contact visits for violent offenders, and watched Jian lift their baby up, tiny palm meeting Minute J's through the barrier. Hi, G Minute. Minute J whispered, voice cracking. It's your Alpha Appa. G Minute blinked at him with solemn brown eyes, Jian's eyes, and grabbed at the glass like he could reach through. Minute J broke down crying right there in the visiting room, and didn't care who saw. Year 3. Appa. G Minute said during the second visit, pointing at Minute J through the glass. It was his first word. Not Omega Appa. Not the parent who fed him, changed him, sang to him every night. Appa. For the father he'd only seen through barriers. Minute J put his forehead against the glass and sobbed. Jian's expression stayed neutral, but his hand moved, instinctive, aborted, like he'd almost reached for Minute J before remembering the wall between them. Yes, Jian told their son quietly. That's your Alpha Appa. Year 4. Minute J earned his degree in social work. Spent his prison time studying rehabilitation psychology, reading everything about breaking cycles of violence, learning how to help people build lives from ruins. Like he was doing. His letters changed. I'm learning that crime isn't just about money or power. It's about systems that fail people until they stop believing legitimate paths exist. I was born into one of those systems. I perpetuated it. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life dismantling them. Jian's replies changed too. G Minute started preschool. He told his teacher his Alpha Appa is in prison making things right. The teacher didn't know what to say. I was proud of him for telling the truth. Year 5. Why is Alpha Appa here? G Minute asked during their quarterly visit, now old enough to understand cages. When is he coming home? Jian looked at his son, 4 years old, bright and curious and innocent, and then at Minute J through the glass. He made mistakes, Jian said carefully. Big ones. He hurt people. He's making them right. Is he bad? Jian studied Minute J, thinner now, gray threading his temples, but with eyes that held something they never had before. Not arrogance. Not hunger for power. Peace. He was, Jian said honestly. But people can change. He's trying very hard to change. Is that why we visit? Yes. G Minute pressed both hands to the glass. Minute J mirrored the gesture, his large palms dwarfing their son's tiny ones. Do you still love him, Omega Appa? G-Minute asked with the devastating honesty of children. Jian met Minute J's eyes across the barrier, across 5 years of letters and tears and slow, painful growth. I'm learning to, he admitted. Through the glass, Minute J mouthed, thank you. Year 6. Jian officially closed his parents' case. The evidence Minute J had turned over, combined with Jian's detective work, led to a formal acknowledgement. Park Sung-ho and Park Mi-young were murdered. Their company was stolen. Their son deserved compensation. The city of Busan issued a public apology. A memorial was erected at Gwangan Dock, the dock they'd built, where Minute J had once proposed in ignorance. Jian brought G-Minute to the dedication ceremony. Told their son about the grandparents he'd never meet. They built something beautiful, Jian said. And someone took it. But we're giving them back their names. That night, he wrote to Minute J. My parents have their names back. Because of what you did. Because you chose truth over protection. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead I just feel tired. And maybe ready to stop being angry. Maybe. Year 7. Minute J's cell had 247 letters from Jian stacked in chronological order, reread until the paper was soft. He'd sent 364 letters out, one every week, sometimes more. He'd grown old in here. Not ancient, he was only 42, but prison aged you differently. Harder. Softer too, in ways that mattered. Jian came for the final visit before Minute J's release. Brought G-Minute, now 7 years old, gap-toothed and smart and asking questions about everything. Alpha Appa gets out next week, G-Minute announced. Are you coming home with us? Minute J looked at Jian. Am I? We'll see, Jian said carefully. We're starting over. From the beginning. What does that mean? It means your Alpha Appa has to earn our trust again. Prove is really changed. But he has changed, G-Minute insisted with the certainty of children who hadn't learned doubt yet. Right, Alpha Appa? Minute J pressed his hand to the glass one last time. I hope so, G-Minute. I'm trying. And watching Jian's expression, neutral, guarded, but with the faintest crack of something that might be hope, Minute J thought. 7 years. I've served 7 years for 7 missed calls. And I'd serve 7 more if that's what it takes. But next week, he'd walk free. And then the real test would begin. Release day. 6 a.m. Jian stood at the prison gates with 7-year-old G-Minute vibrating beside him like a tuning fork, small hand clutched in his. Is he really coming out today? G-Minute asked for the 7th time. Yes, baby. Will he remember me? Jian looked down at his son, Minute J's eyes in his face, his own smile, a perfect blend of both of them, and felt his heart crack open. He could never forget you. The prison gates began to open with a mechanical groan that sounded like the world shifting on its axis. Minute J stepped out. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a simple black shirt that hung looser than it should have, carrying one duffel bag with 7 years of his life compressed inside. He'd aged. Lines bracketed his eyes. Gray threaded through his temples. His hands were scarred from prison work. But he was also lighter somehow, as if 7 years of penance had lifted weight instead of adding it. His eyes found them immediately. G-Minute broke free from Jian's hand and ran. Alpha Appa. Minute J dropped to his knees on the concrete, catching his son, and for the first time in 7 years held his child without glass between them, without guards watching, without time limits. G-Minute, he breathed, and the name contained everything, love and regret and desperate gratitude and wonder that this small miracle was his. You're finally home. G-Minute said, hugging him with 7-year-old fierceness, all elbows and enthusiasm. I am. Minute J's voice broke. He pressed his face against G-Minute's hair, breathing in his son's scent, milk and sunshine and innocence, and felt tears he'd saved for 7 years finally fall. I'm finally home. Jian approached slowly, each step measured, giving Minute J time to see him, to understand what 7 years had changed. Jian had aged too. Not dramatically, he was only 31, but there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of single parenthood and sleepless nights and carrying burdens alone. His hair was longer. His frame a little thinner. But his eyes. His eyes held something they hadn't held in the parking garage that night. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But possibility. They stood there, Alpha, Omega, and the child that shouldn't exist but had waited 3 years in biological suspension to be born, and the bond hummed between them, patient and persistent. Are you my Alpha Appa? G-Minute asked, pulling back to look at Minute J's face even though they'd had this conversation through glass every month for 7 years. Yes, Minute J said, cupping his son's face. I am. Omega Appa says you chose to do the right thing, G-Minute recited seriously, clearly repeating words Jian had taught him. That you answered when it mattered most. This time. The reference to that night, to 7 missed calls and a blocked number and the worst mistake of Minute J's life, landed like a benediction instead of a curse. I did, Minute J said, looking at Jian over their son's head. And I'll keep choosing right. Every day. For both of you. Even when it's hard. G-Minute asked. Especially when it's hard. G-Minute nodded, satisfied, then looked at Jian. Can he come home with us? The question hung in the morning air, weighted with 7 years of distance and monthly visits and letters that said I'm sorry in 1,000 different ways. Jian extended his hand, not for a handshake, but offering. This isn't forgiveness, he said clearly, and Minute J needed to hear it without softening, without illusions. This is a beginning. You have to earn us. Every day. Our trust. Our love. Everything. Minute J took his hand, and the bond sang. Not with the desperate intensity of the parking garage. Not with the agonized separation of 3 years of death. But with something steadier. Something that felt like home. I will, Minute J promised. For the rest of my life. However long it takes. Jian studied him for a long moment, seeing the man who'd blocked him, the man who'd chosen that child over empire, the man who'd spent 7 years becoming someone worthy of second chances. Okay, Jian said quietly. Let's start. G-Minute grabbed both their hands, physically linking them. Can we get pancakes? I'm starving. Alpha Appa, do you like pancakes? Minute J looked at his son, their son, this impossible gift, and felt laughter bubble up for the first time in a decade. I love pancakes. With chocolate chips. Is there any other kind? G-Minute beamed. Omega Appa says too many chocolate chips make you hyper, but I think that's wrong. Your Omega Appa is very wise, Minute J said, catching Jian's small smile. We should probably listen to him. But maybe some chocolate chips. G-Minute negotiated. We'll see. They walked toward Jian's car, a sensible sedan, not the luxury vehicles of Minute J's previous life, a family broken and rebuilt, not perfect but real. Minute J had lost everything. His empire. His reputation. 7 years of his life. 7 years of first steps and first words and bedtime stories and everything that made a father. But he'd found what actually mattered. This moment. This child holding his hand and chattering about pancakes. This Omega walking beside him, not forgiving but trying, giving him the chance Minute J had never given Jian that night. The chance to answer when it mattered. The chance to choose right. The chance to be present. Jian unlocked the car. G-Minute climbed into his booster seat, still talking. Minute J stood by the passenger door, hand on the handle, looking at Jian across the roof. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Jian replied. You haven't earned anything. This is just day 1. Then I'll thank you on day 2. And day 3. And every day after until you don't have to anymore, Jian finished. His expression softened fractionally. Get in. G-Minute will talk your ear off about his school project if you give him the chance. I want to hear everything. Minute J slid into the passenger seat, The first time in 7 years he'd been in a car without handcuffs, and listened to his son explain his science project about butterflies while Jian drove through Busan's early morning streets. The bond hummed between them, quiet and steady. Jian didn't say "I love you." Not yet. Maybe not for months. Maybe not for years. But he reached across the center console at a red light and squeezed Minute J's hand once, and right now, that was enough. They had time. 7 years lost, but decades ahead to rebuild. And Minute J had learned the most important lesson. Some calls you answer with your whole life. This was his answer. Every day. Starting now. 5 years later, Jian and Minute J stand at the grave of Jian's parents. Ji Minute, now 12, places flowers. Minute J has spent 5 years working at a rehabilitation center for Omegas escaping abusive situations, funded entirely by what remained of the Minute fortune. Jian still keeps his badge, still fights for justice, but comes home every night to an alpha who answers on the first ring. They're not perfect. Some days Jian still sees Minute J and remembers that night. But some days, he sees Minute J and remembers this, the man who gave up everything to become worthy of them. The bond mark doesn't burn anymore. It glows.